So, I watched both the Fast and the Furious movies. Here's my thoughts on them. This review is fast but not furious, as angry reviews are passé and I actually liked the newer one. But first, both movies? There's 10 Fast and Furious movies, not counting spin-offs. But there's only 2 movies named The Fast and the Furious, and one of them is from 1954. It's also not very good or worth watching. So let's talk about that one first. Spoiler warning, I guess. The main character of the original Fast and the Furious is Connie, a woman driving a sports car in California. She and her car are kidnapped by leading man Frank Webster, who has escaped from prison and is trying to get to Mexico. It just so happens that there's a big road race happening in a few days that crosses the border and ends in Mexico that Connie was going to enter. Eventually, the plot becomes that Frank will take Connie's car and spot in the race and escape. Also, there's some awful romantic writing thrown in there, because of course the leads fall for each other, because Frank is innocent and was set up. He's too good a driver to have caused the accident that put him in prison. Said inciting incident is never fully explained or shown, by the way. At the end, Frank does not reach Mexico, because he stops to help another driver who crashed, proving to Connie that he's innocent, but then he gets arrested. They kiss. The end. It's not exactly high art. If you like seeing classic cars, maybe you could enjoy the movie, but I was pretty bored by it and only finished because it was short. But overall, I don't really have much more to say about the older movie. You can look at similarities and differences between it and the newer version, but in the end, I don't really see much merit in even comparing them. There's not new context in the old one that will redefine how you view Dominic Toretto, and many similarities are probably not so much inspiration as just plot elements that logically flow from having a premise of a guy who's on the wrong side of the law in car racing. Like, oh boy, both movies have cutaways to police as they try to track down their target, except the police in the old one know who they're looking for. The male lead beats down a guy and puts him in the hospital, except in the old one it's not for revenge and he just knocks him on the head once, incapacitating the guy long enough to be convenient for the plot to happen. Both movies will give you some good old sexist attitudes that women shouldn't be driving race cars from minor characters, though. But one movie does so while showing significantly more skin.
Oh, Miss Constance Adair driving?
Yes.
Yes, I'm right.
I heard they had a meeting last night. This course is too dangerous. All lady drivers are banned.
But I've got to.
I'm sorry, but that's what they decided.
Baby! Hey, baby! You should be watching from the side. I wouldn't want to get any exhaust on that pretty face.
How about you put your money where your mouth is?
Well, how about I race you for that sweet little ass?
So let's move on to the recent The Fast and the Furious from 2001. The good one. The one I liked. The one that fills the small but extremely important niche of movies about people named Dominic. As a Dominic who has trouble separating fiction from reality and also served time for beating a man half to death, Dominic Toretto is everything I needed in a male role model. If only I'd watched these movies growing up, I too could be drowning in women, or more likely could be gunned down by a Chinese gang. But on a serious note, the experience of starting to watch this movie did take me back to my childhood, specifically playing the Need for Speed video game franchise. There was never a question that Need for Speed changed to reflect trends in car culture, and The Fast and the Furious is everything the Need for Speed Underground games were trying to capture. Though there was one thing that wasn't immediately obvious to me when I started watching Fast and the Furious. It's all about drag racing. All the characters know it's all about the quarter mile, but until they actually are off in a straight line with money on the line, I was expecting a longer race. I'm not super in tune with street racing culture, obviously. I can see why a video game would focus on longer tracks while spectators wary of the cops would favor fast, fully visible contests. For what it's worth, the Need for Speed games did have some drag racing too, but it never felt like it was the main focus. Though also for what it's worth, drag racing still seems to be very popular with the youths. I can hear it out my window a lot at nights, though I probably won't be able to get any good distant audio of it for this video. But like seriously, the cops around here have really been trying to crack down on it, just like in the movie. It really picked up during lockdown in 2020, when the roads were really clear, but then it never died off again afterwards. Once I binge through several more of these Fast and Furious movies, maybe I'll be inspired to pimp up my rusted 2005 sedan and go racing as well. Okay, so for a little bit more of an actual review of the reboot movie, I guess I shouldn't be surprised that it was pretty good. It did spawn a whole franchise after all, but I was surprised that the scenes that were actually serious worked out as well as they did. Spoiler warning from here on out as I discuss some specifics. The scenes of the police investigation and when Brian was weighing his options and trying not to be found out are tense. The race scenes are exciting. The action scenes are shot well enough that stunts look impressive. As for the action itself, well, I know it gets stupid later in this series. I mean, just the commercials on TV for 10 had a car dropping out of an airplane and then using like a grappling hook to take out 2 helicopters that are chasing it. So, yeah. But the series starts out pretty stupid too. As impressive as perfectly driving under a semi-truck in just the opening 5 minutes is, the TV heist scheme seems incredibly ill-conceived. I do not believe that they pulled it off successfully multiple times. Like, your best way to steal stuff from a truck is to drive in front of it and fire a grappling hook through the windshield and climb into the truck and fight the driver hand to hand to take over the truck. There were some stupid scenes that brought me incredible pure joy though, especially the final drag race.
I used to drag here back in high school. That railroad crossing up there is exactly a quarter mile away from here. I'm green. I'm going for it.
As soon as I heard that line, I was like, yeah, there's a train coming. They're gonna barely beat the train. And they do. And it's great.
Finish! All right, first place!
Oh, and the credits were very much worth watching. Not for the post-credits scene, but for this one pan in the credits that shows a car at Race Wars with Gengar and Pikachu plushies sticking out the sunroof, which is very funny. Now for what I didn't like. The Asian gang was fine as a red herring for the police investigation, however, they're not really even characters, they're just a weird force of nature that exists in the plot to move things along with violence. Yeah, it's nice that Brian saved Dominic from the cops, but like, what if his car exploded?
So what the hell was...
Luckily, there's some gun-toting Asians on bikes to make that dream a reality. I also thought Jesse was a pretty wasted character. I already understood that trans gang were dangerous psychos before they just cruise by and shoot him up. He demonstrated he has intelligence for about 30 seconds, and then, in the next scene, he sprinkles in that his dad's in jail just before his ill-fated race. But he never felt like a character I really needed to care about. Vince, on the other hand, mattered. Brian blowing his cover to save Vince was a very important moment. I love that this scene was not brought down by any "what the hell, you're a cop" conversation at that moment. Overall, I don't think The Fast and the Furious is an outstanding movie, but I enjoyed it a lot and will watch more of the series. I give the 1954 film a 4 out of 10 and the 2001 film a 7 out of 10.